My name is Ava Bennett. I'm 30 years old, and the day my father decided to celebrate throwing me out of his house, he did it like he was unveiling a grand opening. I pulled into the driveway to grab my last box and saw a giant vinyl banner stretched over the garage in red block letters. Goodbye, Freeloader. Don't come back. The grill was smoking. Country music was blasting. People were laughing like this was some kind of neighborhood holiday. From the patio, a drunk voice shouted that a 30-year-old woman with no real career should be ashamed for living off her parents. Another voice yelled that my poor family had carried me long enough. Then something hit the side of my car. A hot dog. Someone screamed, "There's your last free meal, loser." Even the kids were pointing. I stood there holding my keys so tight they dug into my palm, and the strangest part was this. Nobody there thought they were lying. That was the story they'd told so often. They believed it. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked inside, picked up the last banker's box from the laundry room, came back out, and took one photo of the banner with everybody grinning under it. My father saw me do it and smirked, like I was finally taking a souvenir from the place that had saved me. I drove away without saying a word. 2 weeks later, my phone lit up with messages I never thought I'd get. Talk now. Please call me back. I'm begging you. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I walked out, tell me what time it is where you are right now and where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The version my family told everyone was simple, clean, and humiliating in a way people love because it lets them feel superior. I was 30, divorced before I ever married because the engagement fell apart, working from a laptop, living in my dad's house, and supposedly drifting through life while everybody else carried me. That story played very well at church cookouts, neighborhood driveways, and under Facebook posts, where people love typing things like "tough love works," and "maybe this will finally make her grow up." The truth was messier, quieter, and far more useful to them if nobody ever said it out loud. I had moved back into my father's place 3 years earlier after his sign company started bleeding money. Bennett Graphics and Install used to do decent business making storefront signage, monument signs, trade show displays, and vinyl wraps for small businesses around Phoenix and the surrounding suburbs. Then supply costs shot up, 2 big commercial clients paid late, one project got held up over permit issues, and suddenly the company that had always looked solid from the outside was surviving week to week on fumes and bluffing. My father did what he always did when things got ugly. He got louder. He blamed younger workers, lazy customers, the economy, immigrants, regulations, women in management, and eventually me. Never himself. The part he never mentioned was that I was the reason the company hadn't collapsed 2 years sooner. I didn't have the kind of job my family respected, because they only respected jobs that came with steel-toed boots, uniforms, or some visible sign you were exhausted. I worked remotely as a freelance bid coordinator and operations consultant. I helped regional suppliers, small contractors, and maintenance firms organize vendor packets, clean up proposal submissions, track deadlines, rewrite service scopes, and keep their documentation from falling apart before they could win contracts. It paid well because most people hated the work, and most businesses were terrible at it. I was good at systems, deadlines, and seeing disasters before they happened. That made me valuable to strangers and invisible to my family. At first, helping my father was temporary. That was the lie I told myself because the truth was harder to swallow. The first month, I just reorganized some invoices. The second month, I fixed a missed permit renewal that would have cost him a municipal account. Then I noticed he wasn't remitting sales tax correctly. Then I found equipment leases set to auto-renew at absurd rates. Then I realized half his receivables were fantasy because he wasn't following up properly, and one bookkeeper had quit without handing off anything clean. Every time I fixed one thing, 2 more surfaced behind it like rot under drywall. He never introduced me as the woman keeping his business alive. He introduced me as my daughter's figuring some things out right now. When clients called during dinner and I saved a job from imploding, he acted like I had accidentally done something cute. When I negotiated payment plans with suppliers so they wouldn't put his account on hold, he told relatives I mostly just answered emails. When I covered a payroll gap one Friday because he would rather die than admit he couldn't pay his installers, he called it a loan, then later laughed and said, "Families don't keep score. Families don't keep score. That sentence matters. Remember it. Because families like mine only say that when they benefit from nobody counting." I paid for more than groceries. I covered software subscriptions, overdue utility balances tied to the company workshop, insurance reinstatement fees on one of the work vans, rush shipping on materials when he forgot to order them, and 3 separate vendor deposits that would have killed active projects if they bounced. I never paid everything at once, and that's why it stayed hidden. I paid the difference, the shortfall. The amount needed to keep the machine from screaming loudly enough for outsiders to hear. My father hated that I worked from home because to him, visibility was morality. If he couldn't see sweat, then the labor didn't count. He'd walk through the kitchen and say things like, "Must be nice," while I was on calls trying to prevent a contract cancellation that would have cost him $11,000. He'd make jokes at dinner about my little computer hobby, then ask me an hour later if I could rewrite a vendor response because they were using too many big words, and he thought the client sounded pissed. He treated my competence like a household appliance. Useful when needed. Embarrassing when acknowledged. The rest of the family followed his lead because in families like ours, contempt rolls downhill from whoever owns the loudest voice. My younger sister learned early that mocking me earned approval. My uncle attached himself to my father's company after his own life stalled out, bouncing between installation work, half-hearted sales, and weekend drinking that leaked into weekdays. My grandmother wrapped every cruelty in scripture and concern. Nobody had to coordinate it. That's the genius of a toxic family system. Once the hierarchy is clear, everyone knows how to perform without rehearsal. What changed was not their opinion of me. What changed was that my father started making noise about selling the house and downsizing, and I finally realized he believed his own myth. He thought he had carried me. He thought the roof over my head proved his generosity. He thought because I didn't invoice him, the years of hidden labor and emergency money counted as nothing. He truly believed that if I left, the only thing he would lose was the inconvenience of seeing me in the kitchen. Then one Friday night, I overheard him in the backyard telling my uncle and a neighbor that he was thinking of giving me 90 days to get out, because maybe hitting bottom would finally make a woman out of her. They laughed. My sister laughed too. That was the first time I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling clear. I didn't confront him. I started documenting. People think revenge begins with anger. Mine began with spreadsheets. Not because I'm cold. Because rage in families like mine gets rewritten instantly. The second you cry, you're unstable. The second you raise your voice, you're disrespectful. The second you defend yourself, you're proving their point. Evidence was the only language my father couldn't interrupt, and even then, he'd try. So I built a record of everything. Not just money, dependency. I made a timeline going back 30 months. Every time I covered a gap for Bennett Graphics and install, it went into a file. Every rush payment, every software renewal, every emergency supply order I floated on my card. Every permit fee I paid online because the city portal would have shut them out. Every fuel card transfer. Every invoice I corrected before a client rejected it. Every bid package I assembled under my own freelance company login because my father had missed the submission deadline and then begged me to rescue it. Every text where he said, "Can you just handle this one thing?" Every voicemail from my uncle asking if I could send a couple hundred to keep the van from being repossessed before Monday. Every message from my sister asking me to front her rent because dad said things were tight and she'd pay me back after a brand deal. Every time she didn't. The total after 3 years made me sit back in my chair and stare at the screen. It wasn't just a lot, it was grotesque. The company's support alone had crossed $112,000. If you included the things I paid directly and the things I prevented from becoming catastrophic losses, personal family support pushed the number even higher. The real figure was harder to calculate because unpaid labor has no obvious receipt. How much is it worth to keep a family business from drowning in administrative stupidity? How much is it worth to catch the tax notice before the state freezes the account? How much is it worth to know that every calm dinner they enjoyed came from someone else staying awake until 2 in the morning fixing what they broke? I printed the numbers anyway. Around the same time, I got an offer from a regular client in Colorado. Not a full-time job exactly, but a long contract with enough stability that I could move, rent a place of my own, and stop building my life around people who only loved me when I was useful and invisible. I signed the contract and put down a deposit on a one-bedroom apartment outside Denver. I told no one. I rented a small storage unit near the interstate and started moving things out in batches so gradual nobody noticed. Winter clothes 1 week, books the next. Kitchen equipment I'd bought myself. The expensive monitor my father thought had somehow appeared by magic. Maybe that sounds calculated. It was. When you grow up in a family where every boundary becomes a debate, secrecy starts feeling less like dishonesty and more like oxygen. My father beat me to the formal eviction speech by about 6 days. He cornered me in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing a supplier compliance packet and said he wanted me out by the end of the month. He used that tone people use when they expect applause for their cruelty. He said he was doing this because he loved me enough to stop enabling me. He said no good man would ever respect a woman who still leaned on her father at 30. He said he was embarrassed when clients stopped by and saw my car there in the daytime. He said I needed a real job, my own place, and a wake-up call. I asked him one question. Do you want me gone? Or do you want an audience when I leave? He smirked and said maybe both. That should have been the moment I told him everything. It would have been satisfying for about 10 seconds, but I had spent years watching how he worked. My father could survive facts if he heard them in private. He'd reframe them, deny them, call me dramatic. And by Sunday lunch, the story would be that unstable Ava tried to blackmail him after he lovingly encouraged her to stand on her own 2 feet. No. If the truth was going to land, it needed witnesses. Better yet, consequences. He gave me until Saturday to clear out. I nodded like a woman too ashamed to argue. What I actually did was finish moving everything valuable by Thursday. Friday night, I closed the last of the autopay backups I had quietly tied to company utilities and service accounts. I removed my card from the vendor portal. I notified one supplier that future emergency orders would need management approval. I sent 2 overdue invoice drafts to clients from the company email, exactly as he had requested. Except this time I did not soften the language or make him sound competent. I simply forwarded what he had dictated before, word for word. You'd be amazed how quickly respect evaporates when people have to hear themselves without a translator. Saturday afternoon, I drove back for the last banker's box and walked into the BBQ from hell. Later, people would ask if the banner had shocked me. Honestly, no. The banner was just honesty with hardware grommets. It told the truth of how they had talked about me for years when they thought I couldn't hear. Goodbye, Freeloader, don't come back. That wasn't cruelty invented for a party. That was the family mission statement finally printed large enough for the neighbors. The drunk one on the patio was my Uncle Dean, sweating through a fishing shirt and swinging a beer bottle like a sermon. My sister Kelsey was near the grill in cutoffs and full makeup, already recording pieces of the party for social media because humiliation is more fun when you can edit it with music. My grandmother Lorraine sat under a patio umbrella with that pinched expression she used whenever meanness was being performed in the name of righteousness. My father, Richard Bennett, wore an apron that said "Boss of the Grill" like the universe had personally validated him. He saw me stop in the driveway and spread his arms as if he was welcoming me to my own funeral. "Look who finally came to claim her junk," he said. The neighbor women laughed because that kind of cruelty feels safer when it comes wrapped in suburban sunlight and side dishes. I walked past them all, into the house, to the laundry room, where my last box sat with a black marker note on top that read, "Adult Starter Kit." Inside were dryer sheets, ramen, a half-used roll of trash bags, and a printed list of apartment complexes in town as if they were doing charity for a raccoon they'd trapped under the deck. That almost got a reaction out of me. Not because it hurt, because it was so stupidly theatrical. When I came back outside, Dean was shouting about how my poor mother would be ashamed if she could see what I'd become. My mother had been dead 9 years. He knew exactly where to stab. Kelsey threw the hot dog and everybody howled. My father said nothing to stop it. That mattered more than the insults. Leadership in a family is often just the permission structure for other people's cruelty. So I put the box in my trunk, lifted my phone, and took the photo. My father called after me. "What, collecting evidence for your therapist?" I looked straight at him and said my first words of the day. "No, for later." Then I left. Silence is a terrifying thing when people are used to your labor, your forgiveness, and your availability arriving on demand. The first 3 days after I left, nobody called because they thought they had won. That's how entitlement works. It mistakes absence for surrender, right up until the machine starts shaking. The first crack came Monday afternoon. One of my father's municipal clients rejected a permit resubmission because the insurance certificate attached to the file had expired. Normally, I would have seen the notice, called the broker, forced a same-day update, and resent the package before anyone panicked. This time, the email sat in the inbox until the client copied my father directly with the words, "Final delay before reassignment." He called me once. I let it ring. Tuesday, the subscription for the project management software stopped because the backup card on file was gone and the primary card declined. That meant work orders, measurements, install dates, and material notes went dark until someone fixed billing. My uncle called 3 times. No voicemail. My sister texted me a single line. "Dad says, stop being dramatic and log in." Wednesday morning, the power company left a shutoff warning on the workshop account. I know this because my father called me at 7:12 a.m. for the first time in months, using the voice he usually saved for pastors and bankers. "Ava, sweetheart, call me when you get this. There's some confusion with the utility account. I think maybe your card was still linked somehow. We can straighten it out." Confusion. I nearly admired the audacity. By Thursday, the messages changed tone. My uncle sent a rambling voicemail slurring less than usual, which meant he was actually scared. He said he hadn't meant anything at the party and I knew how he got when he drank, and could I please just help with the van payment because if the company lost the wrap install scheduled for Friday, everyone would suffer. Everyone. That word family systems love most after they've isolated a target. Suddenly it's everyone. I still didn't answer. Friday was when the story broke open. Kelsey called crying, which instantly told me the problem had crossed over from business inconvenience into personal discomfort. She never cried over principle. She cried over disruption. She said Dad was in one of his moods. Uncle Dean was blaming everybody, and Grandma was saying God was punishing the house for pride. She said she needed me to Venmo her $600 because the med spa had cut her hours, and she was short on rent, and Dad had promised to help her. But apparently there was some issue with payroll, and she was so stressed. And could I please not make this into a thing? That phrase, "Don't make this into a thing." It had followed me for years like a curse. Don't make it a thing when Dean made jokes about my body. Don't make it a thing when Dad used my room as storage because I should be grateful to have one. Don't make it a thing when Kelsey borrowed money and forgot. Don't make it a thing when Grandma compared me unfavorably to women 20 years younger with husbands, babies, and church dresses. My pain was always the thing. Their behavior was just weather. So I asked Kelsey a question. Do you know why Dad can't help you? She got quiet in that annoyed younger sibling way that meant she wanted the answer without the shame attached. No, she said. He just keeps saying cash flow is weird. Cash flow is weird, I repeated. Then I laughed. That evening she texted again, this time angry. She accused me of punishing the family because my feelings got hurt. She said Dad had every right to kick me out if I wasn't contributing. She said normal adults pay rent. I sent her one screenshot. Not the whole file, just a cropped spreadsheet showing 3 months of line items with her name, my father's company name, and the workshop utility account. Underneath I wrote, "Since you're interested in contribution." She didn't reply for 2 hours. Then she sent, "What is this?" I said, "A sample." Saturday morning, my father called 6 times before noon. By the 3rd voicemail, the swagger was gone. By the 5th, so was the anger. On the 6th, all that remained was panic wearing a necktie. "Ava, please call me back. I'm asking as your father. We need to clear up what exactly you've been paying and what you turned off. Dean says the vendor account is locked, the workshop power is pending disconnect, and one of the trucks might get pulled because the insurance autopay bounced. If this is some kind of lesson, okay, lesson learned. Call me." Lesson learned. Interesting. Not apology. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "We were wrong." Just the managerial language of a man discovering that his hidden infrastructure has feelings. That afternoon, I did something I had imagined 100 different ways over the years. I assembled a packet. Not dramatic, not vindictive. Clean, professional. 31 pages. Cover sheet, timeline, amounts, screenshots, payment references, notes on emergency interventions. Separate sections for company expenses, household support, direct transfers to family members, and unpaid administrative labor. At the end, I included one photo, the party banner hanging over the garage while my family laughed beneath it. I printed 2 copies, one for me, one for whoever needed to see it. I wasn't planning to send it yet, but life has a sense of timing when people are digging their own holes. That Sunday after church, my grandmother left me a voicemail so sanctimonious it could have come with organ music. She said bitterness would poison my soul. She said my father might have spoken harshly, but he was under pressure, and I should have compassion. She said humiliating my family over money was ugly and unladylike. She said if I had truly been generous, I would not be counting. I called her back, not because I wanted to argue with an old woman, because I wanted a witness. "You're right," I told her. "Generosity doesn't keep score. Accounting does." She inhaled sharply. Then I said, "Grandma, if I send you proof that Dad and Dean have been using me to hold that business together while calling me a freeloader, will you tell the truth for once? Or will you call that dishonor too?" She didn't answer the question, which was an answer. An hour later, my father texted 3 words. "Talk now, please." I replied with one line. "Tomorrow, noon, public place." He responded instantly. "Home." I stared at the message and felt something settle in me. "No," I typed back. "You wanted an audience when I left. You can have one when you ask why." We met Monday at a diner off the highway, where truckers ate breakfast and nobody cared if a grown man looked like he hadn't slept. He arrived 10 minutes early. I could tell because when I pulled in, his truck was already there, crooked in the parking space, like he had come in too fast. Dean was with him. Of course he was. Men like my uncle only believe women are serious when another man is present to absorb the shock. Neither of them ordered food. I put the packet on the table. My father looked at it like paper could insult him. "What is this?" he said. I slid it across. The difference between your story and mine. He opened the packet like a man expecting nonsense. That confidence lasted maybe 10 seconds. His eyes dropped to the total, then snapped back to me like the number itself had insulted him. Dean leaned over, read the first page, and muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath. I had organized everything so there was no room for theater. First came the direct support total over 30 months, then the categories, then company expenses I had covered or prevented, personal transfers to family, screenshots of texts and voicemails, missed filings and penalties I had fixed, and finally a conservative estimate of my unpaid labor. At the end was the photo of the banner. No speech, no melodrama, just facts. My father flipped a page too hard. "This is ridiculous. You're inflating everything." "Am I?" He jabbed at one line. "This software wasn't for me, it was for the office." "Yes," I said. "Your office, your company." Another page. "These fuel payments were temporary." 3 months, I said. "And all 3 were after you told me payroll was fine." Dean had already gone pale. Then my father grabbed for the safest argument. "Families help each other. That doesn't mean you get to act like a debt collector." "Interesting," I said. "When I lived in your house, you called it freeloading. But when you lived off my money, it became family." He lowered his voice. "Don't do this here." "You mean with witnesses?" I asked. "You taught me that." Dean tried his turn. "Ava, honey, I was drunk at the party. I didn't mean any of that." I looked at him. "You didn't apologize when you sobered up. You apologized when the software got shut off." He had no answer. My father switched tactics. "Fine. Let's say you helped more than we realized. You were still living in my house at 30. There it was. His whole religion. Shelter erased every debt I was owed. So I said, if I had paid market rent to a stranger and kept my money away from your business, you would have lost that workshop a year and a half ago. If I had billed you like a client for everything I fixed, you'd be bankrupt. The only reason you got to call me a freeloader is because I loved you quietly." That landed harder than the number. He flipped again until he found the banner photo. His posture changed. Not remorse. Risk assessment. "You took this for leverage," he said. "No, I took it because I knew you'd pretend it wasn't that bad." Dean rubbed his face. "So what now? What do you want?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the part you still don't understand. I already paid. I'm just done." My father's jaw tightened. "You can't walk away and let everything collapse over a grudge." I answered calmly. "I didn't leave because of a grudge. I left because your disrespect finally cost more than my loyalty." That shut him up for a few seconds. Then he asked the real question. "How much of this can you turn back on?" Not "are you okay?" Not "we were wrong." Just operations. I answered honestly. Some things can be fixed. Some can't. A couple vendor accounts might reopen with deposits. The workshop utility can probably stay on if you pay it. The insurance on the truck will cost more now. And at least 2 clients are already damaged because nobody was there to rewrite your emails into professional English. That stung him worse than the money. "You're enjoying this," he said. "No," I said. "I would have enjoyed you noticing before it got here." Then he tried the widower voice. He said life had been hard since my mother died. He said he'd made mistakes. He said we shouldn't be sitting here like enemies. I almost believed the shape of it, not the substance. Pain explained him, but it never excused him. "We're doing this like enemies," I said, "because you threw a party when you thought you no longer needed me." The softness vanished. "So what do you want? An apology? Number? Distance?" That offended him more than anything. Then he made his final move. He listed everyone else. Grandma, Kelsey, Dean. Their need was supposed to become my duty again. I took out a second envelope and set it beside the packet. Inside was a list of bookkeepers, a tax resolution service, a utility assistance program, and a small business attorney. "What's this?" "Resources," I said. "That's all I'm offering." I stood. He stopped me with one last threat. "If you walk out now, don't expect to come back when things turn around." I picked up my keys. "Dad, The only reason things ever turned around in that family was because I was standing behind you, pushing. Then I left. I thought that meeting was the end. It wasn't. When you stop being the hidden support beam in a toxic family, collapse comes in installments. A few days later, my grandmother called, not to apologize, but to negotiate. She said everyone had behaved badly, which in family language means the person with proof is being asked to share blame with the people who caused the damage. She wanted me to come back for a calm talk like Christians. I asked whether the banner had been Christian. She ignored that and moved to business problems. A truck had been sidelined because insurance lapsed. A client was withholding payment. If the company failed, she said, it would hurt the whole family. It already had. Then she used my mother. She said Mom would hate this division. That line used to crack me open. This time it didn't. No, I said. Mom would hate that her daughter was humiliated in public by people who lived off her. For once, my grandmother had nothing ready. Then Kelsey showed up at my apartment in Colorado. She looked exhausted, stripped of all the polish she usually wore like armor. At first, she made small talk, but eventually, she admitted the truth. Dad's company was falling apart. Dean had missed shifts. One printer had been sold. Grandma was furious over money, and Dad kept saying everything could be fixed if I'd stop being stubborn. Then she said something that mattered. I was awful to you. No excuse, no performance, just the sentence. She admitted the hot dog stunt was disgusting. She said she joined in because Dad was pleased and she wanted to be on the safe side of him for once. Then she said the part that changed how I saw everything. When you were there, he aimed most of it at you, she said. Now you're gone. He's turning on everyone. That was the system in one sentence. Families like ours stay stable by feeding one person to the tension. Remove that person, and the poison spreads. I asked her if she had ever truly believed I was freeloading. She looked down. No, I knew you were helping. I just didn't know how much. And if I admitted Dad was lying, everything in that house got scary. Cowardly, honest, human. Not enough to undo it, but still more truth than I'd heard from anyone else. I let her stay one night. My father, meanwhile, went in the opposite direction. He emailed me something called Family Resolution Proposal, offering me a 90-day contractor role to stabilize operations. Compensation could be discussed later, once cash flow improved. At the bottom, he wrote that this would also give me a chance to repair trust. Repair trust. I laughed out loud. I replied with 4 sentences. I am not returning. I am not providing unpaid or deferred labor. Do not contact me for business support again. Future communication should be respectful and personal only. He answered almost instantly. So that's it? You watch your father lose everything? I stared at the message for a long time, because that was the hook buried deepest in me. Children like me are trained to believe that if a parent sinks, we become flotation. Finally, I wrote back. You are not losing everything because I left. You are losing everything because you built a life that only worked while somebody you despised kept carrying it. He never replied. A month later, my grandmother mailed back a casserole dish I'd left at the house years earlier. No note. Just the dish. Like returning glassware restored the moral balance. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then Kelsey texted that the house was going on the market. Not because my father wanted to downsize. Because he had to. She sent one more message after that. He keeps saying you ruined him. I wrote back at once. No. I stopped protecting him from what he built. She answered with 3 words. I know now. The house sold below asking in late summer. I know because public records are brutally neat, and because closure sometimes looks less like a speech and more like a county website confirming that the house where you learned silence now belongs to strangers. Kelsey sent me a blurry photo of the moving truck. Grandma moved in with a cousin. Dean was sleeping on a friend's couch. My father rented a smaller place near the industrial strip and tried to keep the company alive. But 2 major accounts were gone, and one supplier now demanded cash terms only. I did not go back. That mattered more than anything. Real revenge was not standing over the wreckage. It was building a life that no longer needed their recognition. Colorado suited me. One contract turned into more, then referrals, then an LLC with deposits up front and real boundaries. I rented a bigger place, bought a used Subaru in cash, learned what dinner felt like when nobody was manufacturing a crisis in the next room. The peace felt strange at first. Toxic families train you to distrust calm. About 5 months after the sale, my father called from an unknown number. He said immediately that he wasn't calling about money, which told me he knew exactly what I'd think. Then he said he had found one of my mother's recipe cards while packing and thought I might want it. That was the first thing he had offered me in years that didn't come wrapped around a demand. "You can mail it," I said. There was a pause. Then he asked quietly, "Did you really think I was that cruel?" I could have answered 100 ways. Instead, I said, "You hung it over the garage, Dad." He exhaled. That was all. The recipe card arrived 4 days later. Chicken pot pie in my mother's handwriting, with a little note at the bottom. "Add more time if Richard complains." I laughed so suddenly I cried. I framed it. People still ask whether I regret not helping one last time. The question sounds kind, but it hides the same old trap. It assumes the most moral person in the story is the one who sacrifices again. I don't believe that anymore. If someone calls you family only when they need your labor, your money, or your silence, they are not protecting a relationship. They are protecting a system. If a parent needs you small so they can feel large, that is not love without conditions. And if a whole household can laugh while you are humiliated, then panic when your support disappears. The panic is your answer. I was never the freeloader. I was the hidden payroll, the midnight fix, the buffer between chaos and consequence. My father's greatest mistake was not throwing the party. It was believing the person he humiliated would still keep the lights on after. The last message I ever got from Dean came on New Year's Eve. "You were right. No punctuation, no apology. Just that." I didn't answer. Kelsey and I speak now, carefully. Not like movie sisters. More like two women testing whether honesty can grow where competition used to live. She left Arizona too. Got a steadier job. Sometimes she calls with practical adult questions, and I answer when I choose. That distinction matters. I still have the photo. The banner over the garage. The smoke from the grill. My father in his ridiculous apron. Dean half drunk on the patio. Kelsey mid-laugh. All of them certain they were documenting my humiliation. What they actually captured was the final second before their safety net got into her car and drove away. So no, I don't regret leaving. I regret staying long enough to confuse being used with being loved. But I will never regret the photo, the silence, the packet, the distance, or the day I finally understood the difference. My father begged 2 weeks later. By then, it was already too late.